my friends. This is Many Faces, Many Places. This is Roxy Lee, your host. It's about dang time that I work on this episode for you guys. I could not fit an episode about introducing myself into the first season at all because I just had so many other interesting recordings from my interviews with other guests. So it's gonna be on season 2, but I figured it's kind of nonsensical for you guys to listen on for the ride and not really know too much about your host. So there you have it. That's why I'm creating this. So please enjoy this and the next episode to learn a little bit more about me, and I hope it'll help us connect much better. I did go to school in China. I was born in a city called Xi'an, and that's spelled Xi'An, which is situated in the Shanxi province. So if you're unfamiliar with China, how it works is there are provinces, which is kind of like our idea of states. And then, of course, each of those provinces have their own cities. So that is my background. That's where I'm from. That's where half of my personality and cultural experiences lie within, I believe, since I was born there, and I lived there up until the age of 8, turning 9. So, of course, my first language was Chinese, Mandarin. I was born in the year of the rooster. If you follow Chinese zodiac at all, I think it's really interesting. It's one of the first things we learned about as children, and we had to recite it's like a poem or a song where it goes one by one through all of the 12 animals of the zodiac. So it's just been kind of ingrained in me, the order of the animals of the Chinese zodiac, which now I'm not too sure which one comes after another, but I kind of have an idea just because we've had to recite it and memorize it as children. And a lot of people don't know that the cat is not on the zodiac because apparently, according to ancient Chinese mythology, and the plot of that story goes, is that once upon a time, the cat and the mouse were actually best friends. They never hunted each other or ran away from each other. But the day of the race for the order of the zodiac, all of the animals that had to compete, the mouse actually forgot or intentionally did not wake up his best friend, the cat. And the cat missed the race completely. And that's why the cat is not in the zodiac sign. But the mouse, being so cunning and clever, did another thing too, where he jumped on the back of the ox. So that's why in the Chinese zodiac order, the mouse comes first because he was really cunning and clever. But I think people view it kind of maybe as a bad thing because he cheated. And then the ox came second, and so on and so forth. Anyway, telling you a little tale right there. But like us children, if you ever went to school in China or grew up, you might be able to relate because there were quite a lot of poems and stories and songs and historical facts and culturally significant stories that we had to memorize. So anyway, I was born in the year of the rooster, if anyone wants to know. But you can also look up what your own Chinese zodiac is. It repeats every 12 years and learn a little bit about Chinese zodiacs. I think it's really interesting. And if you care about astrology at all, I'm not a huge astrology nerd, but once in a while I do think those, like online quizzes and stuff are interesting. That's like, what is your spirit animal? Or what is your Chinese zodiac sign or your Western astrology sign say about you? Horoscope wise, I am a Leo, which is my sun sign, which I recently learned about natal signs. Has anyone heard of that? Where you basically have a position of the location and time and place that you're born to the time of day that reflects upon all the actual planets. It's not just your sun sign. It's like the moon and your Jupiter sign and your Mercury sign and certain other astrological bodies, I suppose. And it's like something called zenith. I'm actually not sure what that is. But anyway, a couple friends introduced me to that a while back. And for that, if you want to find out what all of your natal signs are, there are many ways to find out. You can do searches online, but the app that my friend shared with me is called CoStar. which I actually have that pinned into my Pinterest board on the Hook You Up folder. So as you know, I ask my guests something for them to hook the viewers up every episode when I have a guest. So if you look at the Hook You Up folder in my Pinterest, which is just like all my other social media handles, which is MFMP pod on Pinterest, there's that folder that you could look at. And I already have it pinned on there. So that's another incentive for you to be following me on Pinterest, because I regularly post to that folder, even if it's not something that a guest formally recommended on the show. But if there's something that I like I've been adding songs and artists and TV shows on there, or books, even if it's something that I don't formally talk about on the podcast, you can still find all of those neat things that I personally would recommend in life. So yeah, hopefully you'll find some interest in the Pinterest boards that I made. Anyway, this is not any promotion of astrology or horoscopes, but it's just curious to talk about. I think it's funny when people, especially when people are dating, I feel like they're like, oh, what's your sign and all this, like it's going to determine your compatibility or something. But I do think it is quite interesting to kind of evaluate the way that we walk this earth. And like, for example, on the quiz that I took and the time that my mom thinks she remembers of when I was born, so it might not even be accurate, but my ascending sign, which is kind of like how you, I guess, appear to the world or to the people around you, like how you present yourself. My ascending sign is a Virgo, which makes a lot of sense because I am totally a bold Leo all the way. Like I've always identified with it. And I think I'm like a pretty on point Leo. But it would kind of make sense to me that I appear to others as a Virgo because I can be pretty earthy and organized. My moon sign is pretty interesting. I didn't expect that. It's actually a Scorpio, which I never really identified as that. But I guess it makes sense because the moon sign is kind of like what your inner most self is that maybe you don't show, but that's kind of how you actually embody yourself on the inside that people don't really know, or you yourself don't know, or it's just kind of like your spiritual, your dark side, well, not dark side, but like the moon mysterious is like your inside. So those are a few things. I think my Gemini is Venus or something like that. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, I don't know if I 100% believe in it, but I do think it's pretty neat and interesting for all of us to learn a little more about ourselves, which is why I do think there is some value and novelty, or at least some fun that you can have exploring your natal signs. So like I said, I was born in China, grew up there, and I went to school, pre-K, all of that up until third grade. And I think I had like 2 months left of third grade, and then I moved to the States. So school in China is, oh my gosh, it's like night and day. Okay. So you know how in America, like you kind of like bullshit your way through school. Elementary school is basically just like sitting around watching movies and doing very easy math or something. Like, oh my gosh, like I remember feeling culture shock when I first went to school. My first day in the States, my mom took me to my third grade classroom. Since it was already almost toward the end of the semester, so all the other kids were already there. I was the new kid in class. And I remember the first day, it was a very vivid memory to me that as soon as the teacher opened the door, I saw kids all over the classroom. There were some on the floor. There were some people on bean bags. There were some kids talking with the teacher, like at her desk. It was a mess. I was like, Mom, I can't do this. What is this? Where is this? Where am I? What is wrong with these kids? Why are they on the floor? It was, yeah, quite a shock to me. Total polar opposites, because for me going to school, it was very structured, very strict. You can't be late. You had to follow the rules 100%. We had scheduled nap times, but we just kind of slept on our desks and bench chairs, and it was not the most comfortable, but you had to take a nap. That was part of the rules. So I believe there was nap time all the way, I know for sure, like from pre-K to first grade. No, I think it goes probably all the way to fifth grade, but I wasn't there to finish that. Since I left in third grade. Sometimes we had school on Saturdays, okay? It was not fun when you're a kid. You're like 6 or 8 years old and you have to go to school on a Saturday to make up work or get ahead. So I think if your teacher felt like you needed to come in to do extra work, well then guess what? My grandparents had to be taking me to school on a Saturday and they would have to drop me off or sit with me. So school is serious business, whereas here you could kind of relax through school and kind of, I mean, honestly, you've seen kids that just wing it through all of middle school and high school. But in America, college is what is difficult because you're not used to being so independent on your studies. Since in middle school and high school, your teacher kind of gives you exactly what is expected and rubrics for your grade. But in college, it's kind of where people struggle because it's so different and you're kind of all on your own. So you better take notes and study independently, or your teacher's not going to remind you. Your professor's not there to baby you. So college does kind of get difficult here. And then the work and concepts learned get more difficult. But in China, it's kind of the other way around, where they prep you to an extreme level that you are so proficient in like all writing and math and philosophy and Chinese history up until all the way that you test for college. So all of like pre-K to high school is really difficult and you really don't have much time to play with your friends or go outside. Like I don't remember one time that I went to a kid's birthday party or hung out at a friend's house after school. Like that's just not a thing. Like you just don't have time for that kind of thing. If anything, you visit family, but you just don't like have little parties or movie nights with your friends or anything like that. Sleepovers were unheard to me until I moved to the US. So in China, it was more like you only had time to kind of like see your maybe cousins or family. But yeah, I don't honestly remember making really good friends with people from school. Of course, when we're at school in class, you have your friends, but there's just not a lot of outside of school socialization. But anyway, China kind of builds you up, and it's a lot of pressure for all of the high schoolers to test for college because you can't just apply to whatever school you want. You have to test to get into them. Versus here, you can maybe take the SAT and like there's like the GRE for your master's and stuff like that. But those tests are like, it doesn't mean you're not going to get in. It just means that if you get a higher score, you're in better shape. Versus in China, those tests that get you into the colleges are like life or death, like intense. So that's why there's so much pressure on kids in China to do so well in school, because if you don't get into college, your life is like ruined. You can't apply next semester. That's not how it works. I mean, I obviously didn't go to college there, but that's just what I've heard. And I've also heard there may be some changes with this now, but the last I heard, you kind of have to stick with your major. So I think there's like less majors offered. They're not like super specific. They're more like, are you liberal arts school or are you science school? It's kind of like that, where you kind of pick more broader majors. Like, are you going to medical field? Are you going into teaching, which would be liberal arts or writing school, or are you picking a math major? It's more like, I think it's more like broader categories, and you kind of have to stick to whichever school. You can't go from like business to biology, for example. Maybe you can switch from like biology to chemistry, something like that. But again, I didn't go to college there, so I might not have the full accurate facts on that, but that's just what I've heard. So be grateful that here in the States, you're able to change your major as many times as you can. Not that it's recommended, of course, because it delays your graduation time, but that's something that the students in China don't have the luxury of. But the good news is it does get easier in college. So that's also something that I've heard, is that once you're in, you can pretty much be relieved. So it's like hell, like all of your life leading up to college, because you're just like praying that you get in, because you would hate to be the kid in your class that didn't get into the nice college that you wanted to, or at all. But then once you're in, I think the professors are a little more loose and relaxed on you because you have been shown to be an exemplary student. And that's what I've heard, at least. I was really shocked to hear that. I think that college actually gets easier, or maybe it's just comparatively easier to high school versus here in the States. It's kind of like high school's like, I mean, I don't want to be mean, but sometimes it's a joke. Like, I did have some hard classes, don't get me wrong. Like, I have some AP classes with lots of work, but I feel like most of us can agree that some of the assignments and coursework, like pretty much anyone can wing it if you just did the minimal. Versus in China, you just can't get away with doing the minimal in high school because there's not a guarantee that you'll make it into college. But don't listen to me too much because that's just my take from the little time that I had in the education system over there. It did prepare me a lot. I am appreciative. My math skills were superior when I came over here, but then I slowly kind of fizzled out and I ended up regressing on my math like throughout, I think middle school is where it started. And then in high school, I just didn't try at all. Like math is not for me, even though I had a good basis and good background, which I am thankful of. Oh, and we actually learned how to write Chinese characters with the Maobi. It's like a watercolor brush kind of thing where you hold it up right and you have to dip it in ink and water. It's kind of like watercolors. So that was fun that we actually did learn to write like that in class, because I do think it's pretty important that we kind of learn those skills from our ancestors. So yeah, I could write all Chinese at a certain point really well, but after I came here, I quickly forgot how to write most things. So now I still speak Mandarin fluently, but I struggle a lot. And it's pretty obvious in my speaking now as I struggle to find some words. Reading also I struggle with, and then writing Chinese, oh, forget about it. I could copy something word by word if I see it in front of me, but I can't just recollect the way the characters are written because every single word is different. We don't have the Latin alphabet system where you can just remember how a word is spelled. It doesn't work like that. It's like you have to remember every single word is a different character. It's kind of like because the way Chinese created was through pictures, basically. So like turtle, they would draw a turtle. And from like water, they would draw waves. And then of course the characters developed over time. And then you have simplified Chinese, which is what I learned. And there's also traditional Chinese, which is more in the Cantonese language. That's why it's so difficult to recall how to write in Chinese. A podcast can feel overwhelming to say the least. I was there not too long ago. For example, did you know you need to pick a server to host and automatically update your podcast feed? Luckily, I found out about Buzzsprout at the perfect timing and have been loving it. So if you or someone you know is thinking about starting a podcast, look no further than Buzzsprout. Sign up using the link in the show notes to get started for free and see how you like it for yourself, and receive a $20 Amazon gift card after you upgrade to a paid plan. So anyway, I did move to El Paso, Texas when I was 8 years old and finished my elementary here, went to middle school. In middle school, I was kind of a rebel. I feel like my group of friends were not the best influence. I mean, I never like got into like any serious trouble or anything like that, but I did on several occasions ditch school and skip class. So that was like kind of the way I rebelled, just kind of following along with my friends that would suggest the idea, I guess. I mean, I never did any drugs or smoked or drank alcohol or anything like that, but it was more just like, I don't feel like coming to school, so I would ditch school. So during middle school, I felt like more kind of like a rebel. And I honestly feel like part of that is because the kids were not the nicest in my schools. And I say schools because there was a point where it got so bad that I had to move to a different school on the opposite side of town just to get a fresh environment. And it really did help a lot. And I was able to make new friends and kind of figure out who I am away from all of the mess and influences from other people. So it really did help a lot. And then after that, I eventually came back to a high school closer to my side of town. But I did do part of middle school and the beginning of my high school in a whole different part of town just because it had gotten so bad where I first went to middle school. I lasted like a year and a half there, I think, and it was just so bad that I just never went back the next semester. I was ditching school and getting in trouble and put in detention in ISS. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like a more severe detention, I guess. And I remember distinctly one day a security, I think it was either a counselor or a security guard, kind of pulled me to the cafeteria and gave me like a counseling or like a talk just because I was getting in trouble. My mom had come to the principal the day before and didn't know what to do. And so they had to take this disciplinary action on me and put me in ISS. And at the time, I was super annoyed and frustrated. And the counselor was just trying to talk to me just to see where like my angst was coming from, I guess, which when you're a teenager, there's like angst at every corner, I feel like. But she or he, I can't remember exactly who it was that talked to me, but I remember them asking me what I wanted to be when I was older. And I think the point was that they were like, well, if you keep missing school and acting up, then you're not ever going to reach those goals and whatever. So I understand what they were doing. And at the time, I was kind of like in like a punk rock phase or goth phase of my life. And I still like that style very much so. Like I still have like gothic elements in my current preferences and tastes. But at the time, I was like watching a lot of Degrassi and things like that. And I said my first dream would be to be a rock star, which is like totally unattainable, which I knew that. And then I said, but secondly, I would probably like to be a talk show host. And I have no idea where that even came from. Like I didn't even watch a lot of talk shows growing up. Like, I think I remember seeing images of like Chelsea Daly or Oprah or something like that. But it's not like I was a huge like Jimmy Fallon or Conan fan back in the day. I was like little, like I didn't even know that many talk shows. So I don't know why I said that. But I just remember it's like funny that I said that specific thing. Like, oh, I would like to be a talk show host when I was in middle school. And now I actually do run a podcast where I interview guests and we basically have a talk show. So just a few months ago, I just realized like, oh my gosh, I've come full circle. But going way, way back, my first ever thing that, you know, when you're a kid and they ask you what you wanted to be, the first thing I probably said in elementary school was an artist. And then, but I always knew in my heart, even as a little kid, that would be very hard to be an artist and survive, and I would be starving. So then I said maybe a teacher, but I think that's only because as kids, that's like who we're exposed to as a profession. So at the time, like I didn't know any better of like other professions available. Of course, I didn't know like dietitian was a thing in elementary. So I said either an artist or a teacher. But it still makes sense to this day because I still love teaching about nutrition and training students and interns and all of that in dietetics. So in a way, I am a teacher, and in a way, I am a talk show host, which is apparently the profession I said I wanted to be when I was in middle school. So I just thought that was kind of funny. And then high school, I did much better, getting through that awkward middle school phase. I feel like in high school, people were a little nicer. I mean, some kids were still annoying, don't get me wrong, but most people were just kind of like minding their own business. And really the dynamic of which school you go to really made a huge difference to me because I was able to thrive a little better after I was moved to a different middle school. And then I was nervous about coming back to my part of town for high school, but I knew it was the time and I knew that I needed to make this shift. And so for the time being, it really saved me. And I was able to survive the rest of my middle school. And then in high school, I felt like kids were more mature and didn't really get into each other's business too much. So, and of course, every high school has their own different dynamic also. So I did go to two different high schools and I did experience the different types of people and the overall school vibe, I guess you could say. So anyway, I did okay in high school. I didn't act up as much. There were still, days here and there, but mostly I kind of was able to explore my creative side more. So like I took photography, I took theater, I took dance, I had tennis practice, I was in the JV tennis team. Of course, not all of these were at the same time. They were in separate semesters or years. But I think I think I did theater only in middle school just to realize it's not for me. Also, the kids were mean. It was so annoying. There was like a play I actually had to like withdraw myself from just because people were bullying, and it was so annoying. And I was like, you know what? I'm not feeling this. You guys do this play on your own. So they had to use like the what is it called? Like the backup person for my character. Cause I was like, I'm not doing this with you guys anymore. It's not worth it. Even though so much I wanted to like theater and I wanted to like acting and drama, but it just wasn't for me. Like I gave it a try, and I think it was again like the kids at the school, and this was like my new middle school that I'm talking about actually, but those theater kids were still mean, and I feel like the teacher didn't really do much about it. And so it drove me out of that passion, to be honest. So I didn't explore theater anymore in school. And then in high school, I immediately loved dance. So I was in dance for 3 out of the 4 years, I believe. Yes, I was. And the only year that I wasn't in dance was junior year, so that I can explore tennis because I never been part of any athletic teams. I like to be fit and I like to exercise, but I'm not someone who enjoys competitive sports, playing or watching them. But I did want to try at least. So I thought tennis was like the best sport that I would be interested in. So I made it in the tryout to the JV tennis team without a day of experience of tennis in my life. I'd never taken a class, but I think it's because the coach was being pretty lenient on who she let in the team. So they let me on the JV team, but I don't think I ever won a match. It's like pretty sad. And well, my excuse is that I never took any formal classes and any training, and most of the people on my team were taking current training or had taken classes before. And I've never gotten any type of training before. So the only tennis training I have is from my high school junior year in the JV team, which I still wish I had more formal tennis training just so I could feel like I'm more skilled. But I mean, I still play here and there a few times a year with friends that enjoy tennis, but I just don't play aggressively or competitively. But I still do enjoy tennis. And what I did outside of school that I sought out for myself is modeling and more dance. So I did join like a local modeling agency here. Again, never got paid for it. It was more like my mom paid for the classes so I can attend these modeling classes. And I was kind of more building experience. So I did do some local fashion shows like bridal quinceañera shows or shows at the mall, like for dillers and stuff like that. So I've done more of those like runway shows. So I have a lot of that experience. That local company was also involved in pageants, but I was never interested in pageants. So I only dealt with the modeling part, but never was interested in joining a pageant. Eventually I stopped modeling, sought out ballet on my own. So I did join a local ballet studio. So I did that for maybe a year or less than a year, which was the hardest thing ever. Okay, ballet is super hard. If you heard my interview with my friend Eden, which is episode 18, if you want to listen to that, I titled it Confessions of an Ex-Ballerina. If you want to hear about the life of a professional ballerina, you can definitely listen to that episode. But I only did it for like a year. I was like 16 when I started, and it's really silly because you want to start super early when you're wanting to be serious about ballet. So I tried all my best and I did not excel in it. I mean, I think I did as best as I could, and it really helped my posture a lot and discipline. And it trains your mind to be super quick-witted because you have to remember so many things about your posture and going with the music and so many things about your body that you have to be aware of in order to perform a simple bar routine, for example. I thoroughly enjoyed that experience and eventually stopped doing that also a short while before I had to go to college. That was kind of like my high school experience. I was involved with a lot of organizations. I had pretty much kind of a diverse group of friends. That was kind of always my vision in life, is not just having like a single friend group, but which is great. Like that's great to have a single group of solid friends that you connect deeply with. But I also pretty much got along with someone from every clique or group, I guess you would say. Like I would know people that were in sports, people in arts, people in orchestra and band, the emo kids, the Asian kids, the choir geeks. Oh, I forgot about choir. I did choir also, part of middle school and part of high school. I totally regressed. I feel like middle school, I did the best. I loved my teacher. She gave me a great, solid understanding. I sang alto. I'm not sure to this day if I should have been soprano, but anyway, she chose me to be alto, so I just embraced it. But I feel like to this day, I have trouble singing low notes. So I'm like, are you sure I should be an alto or should I be a soprano? But I did middle school. I did like 1 year in middle school and I did another year in high school. So I just stayed being alto the whole time. And I definitely feel myself regressing after I stopped doing choir. Just even like singing hymns at church. That's like when I notice when like we're worshiping in church that I'm like, oh my God, I can't sing anymore. This is sad. But anyway, yeah, that's something I almost forgot to talk about. But yes, I did feel like it was important for me to kind of get along with diverse people from different groups. Like if we're at some school event or something, I pretty much kind of recognize a friend from every high school clique. So that was great for me. Of course, I had my closer group of friends that we would eat lunch together every day and all of that more consistently. But toward the latter part of my high school journey, at the end of my junior year, I did meet my husband there. So, yes, we're high school sweethearts. Despite all odds, we started dating in May of 2009. It was actually the end of my sophomore year. So, not junior year, actually, because he's 2 years older than me. So, yeah, it was the end of my sophomore year and the end of his senior year. So, we always have this saying that, like, it's always like so easy for us to miss each other. Like, there's been times where we're at the same place and we just don't run into each other, or we find out later that we missed each other somewhere. And we always have this joke that it's like the universe is like against us or something, where we just like can never meet at the same time. And we have this saying too that he was about to graduate high school in 2 months. And if it wasn't for this chance meeting that we had in the hallway, we would not be together at this time, because I feel like we would have never, ever run into each other outside of school. If he had graduated and I never met him before that, then I don't think I ever would have. El Paso is, I guess, considered a small city in some people's eyes, but it actually is a big city. We're like 700,000 people, maybe getting closer to 800,000 people now. So it's actually a huge ass city if you think about it, comparing to other big cities. But there's like a saying here too that it's kind of like, oh, well, it's El Paso, like, you know everyone, or you see someone you recognize, it's because it's El Paso. But I don't feel like that. Like, I don't always run into people. Maybe it's because I'm oblivious, but there's like very rare times where I actually run into people that I know. There's been times where I do feel like people are recognizable, like I've met them before, but I don't recall. But it's still a big enough city where I don't go to the grocery store and see someone that I know. Like, it's very rare to me. I feel like it does happen more to my husband, though. And he also has very great facial memory. So he always recognizes people when we're out. But yeah, anyway, we do feel like without that chance meeting in the high school hallway at this point, we probably still would have never bumped into each other, even though we live in a supposed city where you run into people that you know all the time. My husband's name is Jorge, but he prefers George, but that was his given name, is Jorge. I do call him that sometimes just to be annoying, but yes, his name is George and he is Hispanic. His mother is from Juarez, Mexico, and he was born here in El Paso. So he is a native El Pasoan. He is of Mexicans, probably Spanish descent. I always feel like there's so many similarities between Asian cultures and Hispanic cultures. It's just so much overlap. Like, we both love food. The cultures, I mean, the separate countries, we both like all pretty much communicate and express love through food. Like, the first thing that you ask someone when they come to your house is, have you eaten yet? Like, Chinese would be 你吃了吗? So that's like something super similar. I feel like how the cultures are emphasizing on food and gatherings and spending time with families so much. It's just interesting to me that the countries like Mexico and China have never really dealt too much with each other, like politically or economically. However, the social norms and customs, to me, are like identical, I feel like, and their values also. So in 2011, we adopted Tiki, our son, our Chihuahua, right after my graduation from my senior year. And then Rue, our little girl, she was stated as long-haired Chihuahua, but we feel like she's more of a Russian toy terrier that someone told me by seeing her picture. They were like, that's a Russian toy terrier. And I'm like, oh, really? I've never heard of that dog breed. I always thought she was a long-haired Chihuahua, but she does look quite different. Like she kind of looks like a mix between a long-haired Chihuahua and a Papillon kind of thing, because she has those kind of butterfly, really long hair ears, and she does have really long hair on her tail. But yeah, if you look up Russian toy terrier, Russian toy terrier, she's the one that's like the red coat with long hair. She looks just like that. But anyway, we did adopt Rue in Tahoka, Texas, near Lubbock in 2014 when we were going to college together in Texas Tech. My husband followed me. Well, at the time we were, of course, boyfriend, girlfriend. Followed me, we moved to Lubbock to go to school. We got married in 2013. So we just celebrated is it 9 years? Oh, wow. Yep. We just celebrated our 9 years being married anniversary. But I like to kind of count all of the years because, I mean, we were still together all the time. Like we were basically like a married couple before we ever got married. So we have been together for 13 years. Oh my gosh. Pretty impressive that I can say that out loud. It just kind of feels like we are two peas in a pod. Like we're like kind of like an old couple at this point. We've just been through so much. And then we moved to Houston where this is great. Like I love my husband. He basically followed me everywhere for school. The reason I picked Texas Tech was because they had the nutrition and dietetics degree, obviously, which I'll talk about more in the next episode. And we moved to Houston so that I can do my master's there. And then we were there for 2 years. And then we finally moved back to El Paso, which was calling me back to my hometown. You will get to hear my husband in one of the future episodes coming up pretty soon. So that will be something fun and exciting to look forward to. All right, so I will stop this part here. If you enjoyed it, please help me to leave a review about your thoughts on the entire podcast. If you like the show, you can do that from Apple Podcasts. So if you have the Apple Podcast app on your iPhone, or if you don't have an iPhone, you can use iTunes on a computer and look for the podcast, and then you can leave me a review at the bottom and type a little comment. That would be great. I love reading your positive feedback and your thoughts on the show. Stay tuned for the rest of this story about me. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening. You can now drop me a voicemail that might be aired in a future episode. You'll find the link in my Twitter and Instagram bios at MFMP Pod. Subscribe to my YouTube channel by searching Many Faces, Many Places, all in one word. Lastly, make sure to tap the follow button on your favorite podcasting app to stay tuned for new episodes.